It's time now, ladies and gentlemen, for the introduction of our drivers for tonight's 5th annual National Championship 3-hour figure-8 endurance race. No fewer than 6 drivers in qualifications this afternoon broke the old track record, and heading them, the guy who held that old track record, starting on the pole tonight, the driver of the black car number 1 from Indianapolis, the M&M Automotive Corvette of Kenny St. John. Outside of row number 1, second starting position, just a tick of the watch slower than St. John. From Indianapolis, a 1980 Corvette, Milam Used Cars, Southside Radiator, the sponsors. Wayne Arnold in car number 12. Arnold in 12. Third starting position, inside of row number 2, also from Indianapolis, the Rayburn Automobile, Hadley Electric, the sponsor of car number PH5, Ray Bray. Fourth fastest qualifier from Indianapolis, familiar to all of you who have frequented the West Side Oval, Lonnie Breedlove, who competed regularly at Raceway Park. Fifth starting position, inside of row number 3, car number 2 from Indianapolis, Donnie Utterback. Sixth starting position, outside of the third row, also from Indianapolis, Gary Gross. The fourth row, inside of row 4, from Toledo, Ohio, a 2-time former figure-8 world champion, Chuck Hall. Eighth starting position, also from Indianapolis, the Masterpiece Lounge Camaro of Mike St. John. The fifth row, ninth starting position, from Taylor, Michigan, driving car number 9, Tom Varcell. Outside of the fifth row, car number 4 from Indianapolis, the Grayson Standard Greg & Sons Camaro of Bill Fraser. Starting 11th, car number 25 from Indianapolis, 32-year Speedrome veteran, Billy Arnold. Outside of the sixth row, 12th starting position, car number 771, another driver from the Northlands of Michigan, Billy Simmons. Starting 13th, inside of row number 7, from South Rockwood, Michigan, Gary Early. Starting 14th, car number 54, the man who finished second last year to Kenny St. John, Bob Stute from Dearborn Heights, Michigan. 15th starting position, inside of row number 8 from Indianapolis, Donnie Garrigus. Starting 16th, the Schmidt Automotive Camaro. He built this machine himself, car number 7, Jim Tunney. On the inside of row number 9 from Indianapolis, 1970 Camaro, the driver of car number 01 is Joe Jackson. 18th starting position, the Southeast Auto Parts Camaro of Dave Grayson, car number 8. Starting 19th from Louisville, Kentucky, Mike Knight in car number 96. 20th starting spot, another Michigan driver from Taylor, Michigan, car number 4A, Jack Dandy. Row number 11, from Anderson, Indiana, a veteran of the High Banks in Anderson, car number 11, Herb Rose. 22nd starting position, the Sonley's Automotive Firebird, car number 98, Bob Coffey. And in the 12th row, from Romulus, Michigan, car number 779, 23rd starting spot, Ray Gaddis. 24th starting position, the outside of row number 12, and his 74 Trans Am is Cecil Carr. Car number 98X. Well, there are your 24 starters. However, those are not the only 24 drivers who will be competing tonight. The balance of the machines will be lined up at the back gate, and when one of these drivers suffers a serious problem with his machinery of some kind, the track officials will send another driver on to take his place. So we expect to see the track full of race cars at all times during the running of tonight's 3-hour endurance race. Gentlemen, start your engines. We're ready to go. 24 cars will take the green flag. Many more will get an opportunity to go racing during this one tonight. And Larry Newber, quite an interesting field of cars. Tonight, Kenny St. John, during qualifications, clocked a lap at a 1.5 seconds faster than the figure-8 track record, a testimonial not only to the condition of the racing surface, but also to the beautiful new Dave Dayton prepared Corvette, behind the wheel of which Kenny St. John sits. And we should point out that right next to him, the winner of 37 features here at the Speedrome in 1981, Wayne Arnold, who was seriously injured in a crash just a couple of weeks ago. But those two guys are your favorites, and they sit right in that front row.
Rob, not only the stories of the racetrack and the stories of our fastest qualifiers for the 1981 event, but also it's a story of the meeting of two worlds, in a sense. Some of the top drivers from the Toledo-Detroit area, campaigning mostly at the Flat Rock Speedway in Flat Rock, Michigan, one of the suburbs just south of Detroit. That racetrack has brought to the Indianapolis Speedrome its top drivers for this event, and of course, all of the top hometown favorites. So, in one sense, not only are there stories within each and every one of the cockpits, but also it's almost a battle between a couple of leagues. The Detroit area against the Indianapolis area, the two cities that actually got the automotive revolution underway in the early 1900s in this country. Both of the cities were the early automotive centers here. A lot of the cars of the 1900s, the 1910s, and 1920s, in addition to being constructed in Detroit, were also constructed right here in the Indianapolis area. Of course, a guy by the name of Henry Ford came along and made Detroit the motor car capital of the world, but Indianapolis, there are those who say, is certainly the automobile racing capital of the world.
Larry, before this race even gets underway, Herb Rose from Anderson, Indiana, the driver of car number 11, did not make it to the starting grid, and that moves Jack Dawsey, who qualified 25th, into the starting lineup, and it gives him a chance to take the green flag. A totally unique racing event, 3 hours of figure-8 endurance racing. Never will a driver have an opportunity to rest or relax. There are no real straightaways per se. You can't rest at all, Larry. You've got to be constantly on the alert for cars coming from opposite directions of you.
We will go 4 pace laps. Keep your eye on the black Pontiac Firebird pace car. When it removes itself from the speedway, we are just one final pace lap away from the start of the race. There will be a wave lap, so the fans in the grandstand area here at the Indianapolis Speedrome have a last opportunity to communicate, albeit only visually and in gestures, with the competitors on the speedway. 4 pace laps, then we go racing. Up front, 2 of the more familiar names, not only in automobile racing here in the Indianapolis area, but in all of figure-8 racing across the country. Kenny St. John and Wayne Arnold, a pair of almost identically prepared Corvette stock car race cars. Watch for them to dart away from the field when the green flag finally does unfurl.
Row number 2, also an exciting row with some super lightweight outlaw stock cars. This race is called an outlaw stock car race, meaning that the restrictions and rules are very limited in nature. But if we look back to the 3rd row, we see a couple of pro stock automobiles. Ladies and gentlemen, on your feet this time around. Let's wave these guys on their way. Godspeed and the best of luck. The bravest race drivers in the world in probably one of the world's most grueling and dangerous races right here in Indianapolis at the Speedrome. Who knows how many laps will complete in the next 3 hours? Many people speculate it could be in excess of 500 laps around this oval. Figure-8 tonight.
Row number 4, the fastest qualifier of the visitors, Chuck Hall out of Toledo, Ohio. He is a former 2-time champion of the World Figure-8 race at Islip, New York. He was 3rd in this event a year ago. He'll sit on the inside of the 4th row. He'll be flanked in his outside by young Mike St. John, the younger brother of our pole setter, Kenny St. John. That is row number 4, anticipating green flag on this lap. Flagman Carl Hall watches the field as it motors slowly, coming out of the figure-8, the apex of the 8 that's on the north side of this racetrack. Now St. John and Arnold bring the cars down to the south end of the speedway through what is known as turns 4 and 3 if this were oval racing, but for figure-8 racing, it's just reversed. That'll be turns 3 and 4. Here they come, St. John and Arnold, anticipating green flag this time around. Aerial fireworks signify the final moments before this race gets underway. Arnold and St. John begin to accelerate out of turn number 1. Now turn number 4, rather, the figure-8. We've got a green flag into the number 1 corner. Kenny St. John grabs the early lead, and car number 1, Wayne Arnold, moves in the number 2 position in the PH number 5 car. Ray Bray grabs third, and right away the first 3 cars begin to open up some distance between themselves and the rest of the field.
3 Dave Dayton prepared stock cars in this one at the green flag as St. John and Arnold choose opposite courses through the crossover that time. The third car, driven by Lonnie Breedlove, who started in row number 2, immediately drops back to 7th position. And Larry Newber 1 lap into this one, and already action in the crossover. Wayne Arnold in the lead and beginning to stretch it would appear over St. John. Now it's when timing becomes of the essence.
Well, when you start 24 cars, it's bound to be a very short period of time before you begin to get some confusion at the crossroads of America here. Continuing to lead is Arnold in car number 12. Arnold has opened up a pretty comfortable distance, although there's a long, long ways to go, and Rob Albright, already the scoring headache has begun.
It certainly has. Chuck Hall, his 6-cylinder Camaro, has moved into 2nd position. Ray Bray is 3rd, and Kenny St. John, in what would have to be construed as a shaky start, has dropped to 4th. St. John, in fact, did get briefly together with another machine in the crossover, and for a minute it looked like it might be a very short race for Kenny St. John. Wayne Arnold so far having no problems whatsoever as he continues to build upon his early lead.
Well, one thing to keep in mind here is that an early lead is almost meaningless because the idea here is to finish the race. It really makes very little difference how many laps you lead, particularly in the first hour of this race. Remember, we are not going a prescribed number of laps. This race is based on time. It will be a 3-hour event. And not only is speed important, but finishing, endurance, and strategy becomes very significant. And don't forget to count out all those people from the Detroit-Toledo area. All of them are veterans in this type of racing. They have competed in these endurance races before, and even though they may not be among the early race leaders right now, watch for them to be in there, certainly near the end of this race.
Larry, a couple of peculiarities that they regard to this race here at the Speedrome, and that is this, that yellow flags do not mean that you slow down and bunch up. A yellow simply means that somebody has had some problem on the racetrack and that you should be alert for that. Other places around the track you can run at racing speed and you do not have to maintain your position under a yellow. The only laps that will not count in this race is when the red flag comes out. That brings the machines to a complete halt and the time will stop. So we'll have 3 hours of green and yellow flag racing in this event. Your leader is now Chuck Hall in car number 5, and as we mentioned that, Wayne Arnold pulls back alongside in car number 12. We talked about Kenny St. John getting a shaky start, but that man knows what he's doing. He's back into 4th position and right with your lead pack. It's Chuck Hall, Wayne Arnold, Ray Bray, Kenny St. John is 5th, and they're running in that order. The top 4 machines right together, a 6-cylinder leading the pack, and 3 big bore V8 Outlaw stockers trailing him.
And one of the people who's had problems early on in the race here is a guy that we had just begun to watch in car number 771, Billy Simmons. He started this race back in about 12th position, had improved his position by about 4, and had moved up to 8th and appeared to be making a move toward the front. Billy Simmons, the son of one of the most legendary figure-8 drivers of all time, Little Richard Simmons, and Billy has backed into the infield area here at the Speedrome in turns 3 and 4 of the figure-8 course and is sitting silently in the infield. Perhaps Simmons is out of it already.
Well, it looks interesting. I wouldn't call him out. He has come to a stop in the infield, maybe waiting for an opportunity to move into the pit area, but that machine has come to a complete halt in the infield. That's got to be a disappointment. As we look down over the field in the running order of these machines, what fascinates me, Larry, is that you have a wide range of types of machinery. You have the $20,000 Outlaw stockers, and then you have machines ranging down in price to perhaps $1,500 to $2,000, and those are the modified stock cars, and a couple of those, in fact, running near the front of the pack.
And if you look up and down this field, you also see that aerodynamics has worked its way into figure-8 racing. Yes, even figure-8 racing. most of the cars that are running near the front, matter of fact, all those with the exception of the current leader, Chuck Hall, have either an aerofoil or a car that is actually designed with aerodynamics in mind from the ground up. The race car that Lonnie Breedlove, for instance, is driving is nothing more than a modified wedge like we used to see running at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the early 1970s. The car is very similar in appearance, as a matter of fact, to the STP wedges of Andy Granatelli. The driver's cockpit is even offset to the left. Of course, that is there primarily for racing when he runs on the traditional ovals, where all you do is turn to the left. But Breedlove here, turning right and turning left, that offset may not be that much of an advantage. The leaders, Rob, in very heavy traffic.
Well, Larry, they'll stay that way just about the entirety of the evening. I look down into the pit area now, and I see the track officials motioning another car out onto the racetrack. So this is the kind of thing we'll be watching for all night long. It looks like car number 60A, Luby Allen from Taylor, Michigan, now getting an opportunity to join the race. When one of the machines is damaged to what appears to be an extent too serious to continue, another car will be added. 57 machines make qualifying runs this afternoon. We've got a lot of them sitting in the pit area, chomping at the bit and waiting an opportunity to get out on the racetrack. Your leader continues to be Chuck Hall in car number 5, closely pursued by number 12, Wayne Arnold. Third is Kenny St. John in the black car number 1. Fourth is Ray Bray in PH5. Lonnie Breedlove now has fought his way back to 5th in car number 0. Sixth is 4, Bill Fraser. And now one of the machines is spun right in front of your leaders. That's the younger brother of Kenny St. John, Mike St. John, who was one of the fastest qualifiers and was running very, very well up to that point in the race.
Well, as you watch the action at the crossover, or the X, or the center of the figure-8, whatever you choose to call it, you can see that there are several, and whoa, some real close action in the X at this point. There are several ways of maneuvering through that particularly dangerous part of this racetrack. You know, you don't always have to drive straight. You'll see some of the competitors from time to time turning their race car at almost 45-degree angle to their intended direction of travel simply to avoid a collision. Obviously, that cost you valuable time. You just saw the number 43 car of Donnie Garrigus make that kind of maneuver we were talking about. Then, of course, there's always the easy way out, and that's to brake or maybe even stop at the crossover. And, Rob, that's something that the top drivers just don't like to do they?
No, they certainly don't. And I've talked to just about all of the Speedrome drivers about their strategy in regards to this race. And what might surprise you a little bit, what Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John saw as the biggest advantage they had with their outlaw stockers was not necessarily the fact that they could negotiate the track so much faster. They referred primarily, Larry, to their ability to make the quick move through the crossover, that they could punch that throttle, get immediate response, and that is what they saw as their strongest advantage, that they could keep themselves out of trouble with those machines as opposed to simply flying around the racetrack. They saw that as of secondary importance. And while we speak, Wayne Arnold has moved back into the lead in car number 12. I think we'll see this kind of jockeying for position among your leaders all night long, kind of playing a wait-and-see game, watching the competition, hanging in there, trying to keep your machine out of trouble. Dave Grayson spinning in car number 8. He's underway once again, and another couple of machines spinning. It's Gary Early in 09, and one of our front runners, Ray Bray, in PH5. Bray was running 4th at the time of his spin. He's underway again, but he's given up a good 2/3 of a lap to your front-running pack, and as he waits for a chance to move through the crossover, your lead group comes right in behind him. Now Kenny St. John, who started on the pole and had dropped back, has asserted himself once more and is out in front in car number 1. It's Kenny St. John, the leader, and now Bob Coffey is spun in car number 98. So apparently, Larry, the racetrack pretty slippery at this point.
Well, of course, now we have a car leaving the pit, or rather leaving the racetrack area, going back into the pit area. That does not mean, again, that he has been eliminated from this race. Rob, you started talking about track conditions, and that certainly will become a factor as this race wears on. Remember, we're only 8 minutes into 180 minutes of racing, and you know as well as I do, just from driving your pleasure car around the streets when you park it in the garage at home at night, it drops liquid, and you don't even abuse that car nearly as hard as the drivers will be abusing the cars here. Not only does oil and water get on the racetrack, but a certain amount of the rubber from the tires of these race cars is laid down on top of the blacktop surface. And as that rubber heats up, it becomes considerably more slippery than what the normal racetrack is. Car number 9 pulling to the pit area.
I believe
Tom
that was
Barzel.
right, and it looked like the rear end loose in that machine, the entire transaxle unit in the back of that car, so that could spell the end for him.
And Barzel was running in the top 10. Tom was one of the early people in the top 5. He had dropped off the pace just a little bit. The pace that Chuck Hall has been setting as he continues to lead this race. Hall right now is working on trying to put a lap on Ray Bray. Bray, you remember, was as high as 4th position in this race at that PH number 5, or PH5, and right now is the entire distance of the racetrack behind the leader, car number 5, Chuck Hall.
Larry, just 29 laps into this race, and already I don't think either one of us with any degree of authority could go back more than about 5 positions deep, if that far at all. Wayne Arnold is your leader in car number 12. Behind him is Kenny St. John in the black number 1. Unofficially, well, apparently it's Chuck Hall who is your leader, and Chuck beginning to move away a little bit. I had ignored the fact that Chuck had moved well out in front. Arnold is 2nd, St. John is 3rd in car number 1, and 4th it would appear to be Lonnie Breedlove in car number 0. And I'll tell you, Breedlove almost took it in the crossover that time through.
Well, the latest competitor to be added to the field because of the withdrawal of another driver is Dean Griffin. Now, Dean is one of the regulars here at the Indianapolis Speedrome, the only driver to score points on all 26 nights of the 1981 Speedrome Pro Stock competition. So he's a guy who knows this racetrack pretty well. The car number is 97. It's a 1967 Firebird, and he joins the fray. And what a fray it is. Right now, we have a pack of cars, about 12 or 14 strong, and they meet a pack of about 6 or 8 at the Speedrome. Something's got to give, and a lot of people hit the brakes hard, but nobody made contact.
Your 3 front runners all had to jump on the binders to avoid problems in the crossover. And what's happened now, it's given Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John a chance to close on your leader, Chuck Hall. So those 3 machines, the 3 front runners, 33 laps into the race, still right together on the racetrack. Again, Hall forced to slow for the crossover, and Wayne Arnold uses that brief opportunity to pull alongside. So the 2 front runners, Arnold and Hall, now side by side. Those 3 machines run 1, 2, 3. 4th is car number 0, Lonnie Breedlove. And unofficially in 5th position would be Bill Fraser in the black car number 4. I believe, Larry, those are the only automobiles on the lead lap, and just as soon as the scorers can get caught up, we'll confirm that. We do know the front 3 are Chuck Hall, Kenny St. John, and Wayne Arnold. Now track officials going to work in the pit area again, authorizing another machine apparently to move out onto the racetrack. Cars continue to drop out and have problems. What was incredible about last year's race, Larry, with 478 laps complete, the 2nd place car, a scant 2 laps down to your eventual winner. So that kind of thing could develop despite all kinds of action on the racetrack and red flags, pit action, and so on.
Rob, we also want to make mention of a guy who was added to this race at the 11th hour, so to speak, Jack Dawsey, in an orange-yellow trim number 6 car. He was the 25th fastest qualifier this afternoon among the almost 60 cars that qualified, and Dawsey started this race in last position, and just as we begin to speak about him, he loses valuable moments at the crossover, coming to a stop there. But Dawsey has been running very competitively and very consistently since the drop of the green flag, and unofficially, we got him running near the top 10. He had lost very little ground prior to the last couple of laps and had worked his way through the field and was running up near the leaders at one point in this race. Now we have a car against the fence.
In the number 84, Larry, that's Jack Zandy, who has spun, another one of the visitors from Michigan. One of the guys expected to run up near the front. He's had problems. Now number 09, Gary Early, leaves the track with a flat right front tire. He'll move into the pit area very quickly, change racing rubber, and rejoin the race.
Well, early in the car, 09 is from South Rockwood, Michigan, another of those suburbs of Detroit, and the attrition here about 15 minutes into the race seems to be affecting the people who've driven the most number of miles to get to this race.
Again, your leaders in heavy traffic. It's still Chuck Hall setting the pace. He's alternated with Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John in that posture. Now he is out in front of a great group of automobiles and more or less in the clear, but shortly that will turn to traffic, and that is crossover type traffic. So you not only have to worry about traffic headed the same direction that you are, but traffic that's coming at you from a 90-degree angle.
Car number 20, Bill Horn, you'll be able to pick it out on the racetrack. It's one of the two untainted cars on the speedway. A 1979 Trans Am has been added to the field with the retirement of one of the other competitors, Bill Horn. This car has been rebuilt in the last couple of days after a figure-8 rollover in practice. So there's good reason for the primer. Now, that's not the primer car that's sitting at the crossover right now. That's the car number 01 of Joe Jackson, a guy who at one point was a regular on the very high-speed 5/8 mile paved oval on the other side of Indianapolis, Indiana, the Indianapolis Raceway Park. Chuck Hall continues to lead, but being hotly pursued by Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John, both of them certainly well within striking distance, continuing to cautiously pick their way through slower traffic. The speeds will drop down to the area of 35 to 40 miles an hour across, or around rather, the tight corners here at the Speedrome, but they'll pick up to almost 60 or 70 miles an hour as the competitors barrel off the number 4 and the number 2 corners on the figure-8 course and head for the X in the middle of the infield.
Larry, most figure-8 features in outlaw stock car racing at the Speedrome, 50 laps in duration. As one of your two front-running cars, Chuck Hall, starts between 01 Joe Jackson and 25 Billy Arnold as he slices through the crossover. It was very close, or it appeared to us to be a close call. But you know, that might not be the case. These drivers know what they're doing on the racetrack and make those moves, and we might think it's carelessness on their part. It paid off for Chuck Hall. He's back into third position now. Your leader is Wayne Arnold in car number 12. Second is Chuck Hall. Running third is Kenny St. John in the black car number 1. Billy Arnold trying to get his car number 25 off the racetrack. Now he has done that. He and Dean Griffin both move into the pit area simultaneously. The pit, Larry, really becomes in this race a part of the racetrack. And I'll tell you, it's a dangerous place to be to stand and watch a race. Gary Lee is down there, and just as soon as Gary has a report of some of the action that he's seen already in the pit area, we'll be going down to Gary for his observation.
The man who was the leading money winner, or I should say is the leading money winner at this racetrack for the current season, Wayne Arnold, the all-time leading money winner, of course, Kenny St. John, but the man who won more money this year at the Indianapolis Speedrome than anybody, Wayne Arnold, has begun to put a little bit of distance between himself and the second-place car of Chuck Hall and the third-place car of Kenny St. John. They have also lapped once one of their most significant competitors, Lonnie Breedlove, in the aerodynamically designed silver number 0. So Breedlove drops a lap down to the 3 lead cars, at least, here in the early stages of the race.
Another machine has been added to the race. Car number 91, Gary Haskett. His 1979 Camaro now moves on to the racetrack. He was the 28th fastest qualifier. He now gets an opportunity to compete. Gary finished 7th in last year's 3-hour endurance race and expected to do well here tonight. He'll be fighting out of something of a deficit, as he already has 53 laps to make up. That's how many your leaders have completed. Still Wayne Arnold setting the pace in the orange Corvette car number 12. We look several car lengths back and we find Kenny St. John riding in second position in the black car number 1. Third is the red and white number 5 of Chuck Hall, and those are the only 3 cars still on the lead lap. The only machines that have completed 55 laps.
If you're familiar with pavement racing, of course, you know that one of the major factors is tires. Well, tires should not be a major factor in this race. A lot of the top contenders are using very professionally designed and high-cost racing slick tires, the kind that are used in the high-speed ovals around the country, and they really don't figure that those tires are going to wear out at these speeds even for this number of laps. Now, everybody will have to pit probably at least twice for fuel, and when they do pit, there will be an opportunity, of course, at that time to change tires should it be necessary. So even though tires so often play a role in the outcome of a race, here it really shouldn't be a factor. That is, of course, unless you get caught at the crossover and a collision flattens one or more of your tires, it's pretty difficult to run at a high speed with flat tires in the race car.
Larry, we've had another lead change. Kenny St. John, car number 1, tonight's fastest qualifier, back out in front as he's gotten around Wayne Arnold. Arnold is second, and St. John looks like he's really moving away from Arnold. Chuck Hall still third in car number 5, and a couple of machines together in the crossover. It's car number A60, Luby Allen, and number 4, Jack Dandy. And Dandy tries to circle around and does so right in front of some traffic. We nearly had a problem. One of the machines appears to have lost a fuel tank right out in the middle of the racetrack.
Well, we now do have a predicament. We have a race car with just a little bit of fuel in the lines that lead from the trunk of the car, or what used to be the trunk, to the engine, and when that fuel burns out, he won't have any left. The red flag does come out. We have a fuel tank emptying itself, emptying its contents right here in front of what usually is the start-finish line, but it's actually about the equivalent of the backstretch on the figure-8 course.
Watch what happens now, Larry. You'll see every operable automobile moving off the racetrack. They're all headed back to the pit area, perhaps for tire changes to top off the fuel tanks, maybe to provide their drivers an opportunity to rest just a bit and perhaps get a drink of something cold. They'll be back into the pit area, and momentarily, once that mess is cleaned up, where strangely one of the machines lost a fuel tank. I believe it was the number 4 of Jack Dandy that has apparently some bent suspension parts in the front of that automobile. He's now having difficulty getting off the racetrack. Well, the race isn't over, fans, so don't go home. 61 laps complete, 21.09 minutes complete. You'll see now that the clock has come to a complete stop and will remain so until the green flag comes out once again. 21 minutes and 9 seconds of 3 hours have been completed. Your leader, Kenny St. John, has completed 61 laps.
All right. A three-time champion of the National 3-Hour Enduro Figure-8, Kenny St. John. Obviously, you're starting on the pole, so the strategy has got to be just get out in front and stay there.
Yeah, of course, 3-hour Enduro like this is awful long in time and laps, but we like to start up front where we can see where we're going and just try to develop a rhythm after it gets started.
Obviously, it's easier to drive against guys that you know well, guys that you race against every week. But this has a big purse. We have guys coming in here that you haven't seen for a while. That has to be difficult.
Oh, that makes the timing factor a lot more critical, but we just try to race much like we would any race. The only real big difference we go with on this is it's just going to be about 550 laps where we got it figured.
And that's better than 1,000 times through that crossover.
Yeah, it's necessary. You're going to have to go 0 for 1,000, I'm pretty sure.
What kind of money do you guys have wrapped up in your race car?
My car's not owned by myself. It's owned by Emerson Brothers and Keats. They're sponsored by M&M Automotive, and they've got approximately $25,000.
Which to many viewers is just incredible, because I can recall not that many years ago, the cars racing on the figure-8 were jalopies, for the lack of a better term, that didn't cost but maybe $500 to $1,000 to build, and you guys are out there with $25,000 race cars.
Well, I wish the $500 and $1,000 days were back, but if you got to win, you have to open that checkbook up.
Of course, right now, though, when you take the checkered flag, you get a little bit more as well.
Oh, yeah, it works out on both ends. Everything's relative. It just costs more to go in a hole, I guess.
You're keeping the bills paid.
Oh, yeah, we've been doing real well this summer. We're real happy.
The Bamboo Inn, right?
Yeah, Bamboo Inn. That's Bill and Anna Darks from 10th and Shaylin here in Indianapolis. They've been helping us with the bills a little bit.
Starting on the pole, position number 1 from qualifying, Kenny St. John. Good luck, Kenny.
Thank you, Gary.
Leader once again, Kenny St. John with Wayne Arnold second in car number 12. The other machine on the... So just as soon as we sort out and see who's able to rejoin the race, we'll fill that racetrack once again with 24 racing machines. Your leader once again, Kenny St. John with Wayne Arnold second in car number 12. The other machine on the lead lap and right behind Arnold is car number 5, Chuck Hall. And then fourth, one lap down, number 0, Lonnie Breedlove. Also a lap down is Ray Bray in PH5. One machine among your leaders that has not come back out of the pit area is number 0, Lonnie Breedlove. Car number 11, Herb Rose, who was scheduled to be one of the 24 original starters and was scratched, now has his machine put back together and he's back on the racetrack. No confirmation as to what the problem might have been with that automobile, but Rose now back on the racetrack in car number 11. We still do not see number 0, Lonnie Breedlove.
Some of the other competitors, Rob, who were among those in the starting lineup who have not had difficulty in this event yet, who continue to be out on the racetrack. Car number 7, now these people are not among the leaders. Jim Tunney, he was the 1979 National Figure-8 champion. He's been out all evening with no difficulties being encountered. The number 1M of Mike St. John. And now we have a couple of cars colliding at the crossover in the center of the racetrack, and they are connected together, and this could be a problem. Both the drivers right now sitting in the machines trying to figure some way of extricating themselves from one another.
Well, Larry, car number 95, Fred Deal, had just moved out of the pit area. He doesn't even make it half a straightaway before being hit by another car from behind, and what a disappointing and short racing evening for car number 95, and quickly we go back red after running 60 laps without any problems. On lap number 60, we go red, and once more on lap number 63. Fred Deal obviously okay, the driver of car number 95, but we saw him working hard in the pit area, was unable to get his machine together in time for the start. Now he has it together.
Wayne Arnold is a 3-time track champion here at the Speedrome, but by golly, you haven't taken the checkered flag yet in the 3-hour National Figure-8 Enduro, so what's the strategy for this evening?
Well, we're just going to try to stay in there. Last year we was running a little out-of-class car. We wrecked a good one, you know, the night before the Enduro. So last night we kept her together, and maybe we can keep her together all night tonight.
Now, you have a problem the other drivers don't have in that you're really recovering from an accident a couple of weeks ago in a stock car, which caused you some broken bones or broken ribs, a separated shoulder. So what will that do as far as hanging on for 3 hours?
Well, I got a little pain in the oval last night, but I didn't get a long enough time to run the 8, but what time I did, it felt pretty good, and I've felt pretty good all day in practice. If it don't get to bother me, I'll be all right. If it does, I've got Jim Fox. He's going to relief drive for me, so I think we'll be okay. He's won it once, so maybe we can bring the car in if I can't get in.
On a figure-8 course, you guys are going through the crossover every 13, 14 seconds. Is there any spot on the race course where you can rest?
No, not with the cars that we're running nowadays. You know, the pro stockers, you can rest down the chutes, but these cars that we're running now, the vets, they just get you down the chute so fast that you're having to hold on all the time.
And of course, I would think, having grown up from what we would call jalopies many years ago to the very high-priced, high-powered cars today, that you can really get yourself out of trouble with the throttle as opposed to going for the brake.
Well, yeah, throttle means a lot for getting through the crossover. If you look over and you see that you got a man outpowered coming off one corner going through the crossover, you know, you can outpower him and beat him there, and it helps a bunch instead of having a slow one and you don't know how you're going in.
Is there ever a problem, say, after 2 hours of racing where the mind begins to wander off to some other area and perhaps you lose your concentration?
Well, some drivers have that problem. That's the difference from good race drivers and bad race drivers. When you start daydreaming, you wreck them. And that's the main thing. You got to hold control over yourself.
Qualified for the second starting position outside the front row, car number 12. Thank you, Wayne Arnold.
Thank you.
As we anticipate the green flag one more time from Speedway starter Carl Hall, we remind you of some of the competitors who remain in the pit area. The crews working on the cars. Jack Dandy, the guy who lost the fuel tank, has estimated it'll be about 15 more minutes, but he'll be back out there. Wayne Arnold, who did some repairs on the race car during this red flag, has returned, and Lonnie Breedlove has finally come back out. Lonnie Breedlove has been in the pits about 10 to 12 minutes clock time, but he's actually only lost about 2 or 3 minutes on the racetrack. Again, we remind you, in case you just joined us, that this is a race that's being run by the clock rather than by the number of laps. So Breedlove, having lost 2 to 3 minutes of racing time on the speedway, may not have lost as many laps as he might have in a traditional race.
Back to green once again, and the three-car duel shapes up between Arnold, St. John, and Chuck Hall. And as Wayne Arnold's crew said, we'll have to keep an eye on Wayne Arnold to see just how strong car number 12 is running.
The latest entry to the fray, car number 43. He'll run his 43X because he has the same car number as another competitor, Donnie Garrigus, is Bob Cloud in a 1971 Firebird powered by a Chevrolet-powered engine. Cloud is the only active driver in the United States to run in the very first figure-8 race at the Indianapolis Speedrome.
Larry, as we look down on the racetrack, we expected Wayne Arnold and Kenny St. John to bolt away from the pack. They have not done that. Now, I haven't put a clock on your two front runners, but it appears to me they're running a little bit slower than they were early in the race. And once again, maybe a little of that psychological strategizing going on the racetrack. At least that's what it appears to be.
Well, Rob, you know, there are two things that are going to take a lot of wear and tear during this event. The race car is one and the driver is another one. And I tell you, as a competitor, you have to have a pretty good handle on exactly what type of physical shape that you're in and exactly what can you withstand over a 3-hour period. And as we have seen already with 3 red flags here in the early going, the race itself will actually take a little more than 3 hours. It's going to be 3 hours plus, and so it's very possible that St. John and Arnold at this point are well aware of the fact that they lead this race. They have at least a 1-lap lead on every competitor except Chuck Hall. Chuck Hall is not exactly knocking at the door right now. And so, Rob, I think you're exactly right. I think that they are just pacing themselves more than just a little bit.
While we've been watching the action develop on the racetrack, Ray Bray in car number PH5 has unlatched himself from your leader. So he now moves into the lead lap, and another red flag can certainly help Ray Bray. If you remember, Larry, he spun early in the going, and at the time was really among your front runners. So that machine capable of running out in front. And now he's gotten around both Arnold and St. John and runs in the lead lap. Chuck Hall has fought his way through some traffic after the red flag. He's third, and he now runs with your lead pack. It's Wayne Arnold, Kenny St. John, Chuck Hall, and on the same lap, but nearly a lap down, Ray Bray in car number PH5.
Well, about 1/6 of the way into this race, or 60 laps complete after about 30 minutes of competition. This goes back a few minutes. We could give you a rundown. We've already talked about the first 5. Of course, St. John leading the race. Running in second position was Hall. At that particular point, Wayne Arnold was third. Fourth, 1 lap down with Ray Bray. Fifth in the car number 0 was Lonnie Breedlove before that long pit stop. In sixth position, the car number 54, who was in the starting lineup, Bob Stute, when this race began. Remember, he finished second in this race a year ago. Stute was 1 lap down, or rather 2 laps down to the leaders. In seventh position, in car number 7, was Jim Tunney. Eighth in car number 32 was Gary Gross. Gross had started this race in 7th position. Ninth in car number 2 was Donnie Utterback. In 10th in car number 6 was Jack Dossey Jr., the guy who was added to the field late in the, just before the green flag drop.
Lonnie Breedlove having some problems in car number 0. Remember, he had the brake rotor replaced. Larry, we're seeing some smoke like a plume from the tail of number 12, Wayne Arnold. I don't know if that's an indication of anything serious, but it isn't good news, obviously, because we haven't seen that happen to him before. I don't know if the problem is of any major nature. He's moving ahead of everybody now, but I don't like the looks of that smoke trailing car number 12.
Well, Rob, it appears to come just as he tromps on the accelerator initially. Once he gets the car up to racing speed, at least for that particular vehicle, the smoke does seem to disappear, but when he touches the throttle, the smoke appears.
Wayne Arnold is your leader. Chuck Hall has gotten around Kenny St. John for second position. Kenny runs third, and we've got a bumper, Larry, laying out in the middle of the racetrack, very near the crossover. Apparently, one of the machines has now gone over it. Gary Early has run over that bumper, and rather than getting past it, it's attached itself to the bottom of his race car, and he's now dragging it around and trailing some sparks. Now he goes back into the pit area. I'll bet Gary doesn't even realize what the problem is, but he can probably hear or feel something is amiss in his machine.
Well, he gave us a nice show for at least a couple of seconds, brightened up the speedway for a little bit as a lot of sparks came from underneath the Gary Early race car. Another one of those drivers from the Detroit area. Now, despite the smoke, Wayne Arnold continues to put distance now between himself and the second and third place cars. Arnold has about a half a lap lead, Rod, over St. John and Chuck Hall.
Well, after they paced themselves and ran side by side for a few circuits prior to the dropping of the green flag once again, didn't look like either St. John or Arnold with much of a chance to establish a big lead, but now Wayne Arnold has done just that. He stretched his advantage to half a lap over Chuck Hall and Kenny St. John. I don't know whether he was driving slowly, wondering whether or not his machine capable of going fast or what was going on, but he now is really moving despite the fact that he continues to show a trail of smoke. Now the second and third place cars come through the crossover, and that time Kenny St. John got through the X right in front of Wayne Arnold. Let's see if we can tell now this time through who's moving quicker. St. John gets through just a bit earlier. Shortly, however, Chuck Hall and Kenny St. John will be in some very heavy traffic. Wayne Arnold now with just two cars in front of him before he's got perhaps 500 or 600 feet of clear racing surface. Still Wayne Arnold setting the pace with Chuck Hall second. Kenny St. John third in the black car number 1. Fourth a lap down is Ray Bray in PH5.
Rob, you know, we might spend a couple of minutes and talk about what happens when you enter that crossover. A few minutes ago, we discussed the various routes you can take as you go through the X in the middle of the racetrack. Obviously, the most direct route is to stay on the line or the flow of traffic where the new pavement is and continue on that straight line. You can take that 45-degree angle turn, but a lot of things happen as you cross the crossover. First of all, you have to be concerned about the drivers on both sides of you, trying to anticipate what move they have to make to get over the crossover successfully. Not only do you have to have good peripheral vision, but you have to have a pretty good grasp of the performance of the race car. Being able to predict exactly how much throttle you have left as you enter the crossover so that you know whether or not that car is going to lurch when you stand on the accelerator is a big part of it. You really have to know the equipment. It may look like just a hell-bent for leather style, but you have to think all the time and remember exactly how much you got left, how much of that throttle pedal you've already used by the time you get there.
Larry, you've hit the nail right on the head, and knowledge of equipment is paramount. Not only your own vehicle, but your competition. I think if there's one advantage that the local Speedrome drivers have, it's the fact that a Wayne Arnold or a Kenny St. John, as opposed to a Chuck Hall, can see as they approach the crossover who is approaching from the opposite angle. And they know whether or not that driver has a great amount of throttle ability in his car and what his typical driving characteristics are. They know which drivers are probably going to have a tendency to just remain under full power. They know which drivers will have a tendency to brake, which drivers move right and which move left. It's also a bit of strategy, and I think it takes a great deal of intelligence for these drivers to very quickly become familiar with their competition, the guys that they're not accustomed to running alongside, and anticipating what that other fellow might do. So in addition to knowing the capabilities of your own equipment, you've got to know what the other guy's equipment is capable of and what he is likely to do as a race driver. So I think in that respect, you've certainly sized the situation up. Your leaders now encountering a lot of action in the crossover, both of them making those kinds of wide moves that you talked about. I think they'd rather do that and take a little longer route than to hit the brakes. That is the last recourse, because then you have to regain momentum. It's still Wayne Arnold out in front with Kenny St. John second and Chuck Hall third, but Arnold now seeming to be picking up just a bit more ground on your second and third place machines.
Well, the real danger point in a figure-8 race comes after you've had a long period of green flag racing, because what occurs is that the field strings out. And what happens at that point then, the field on the racetrack suddenly covers the entire speedway, and there are no breaks in the action, so to speak. There are no large gaps between cars, and there is a constant, almost collision, or at least a constant blending of the traffic at the crossover. So it's a long green flag like this that really brings about the real dangerous part of figure-8 racing. When the field strings out, covers the whole racetrack, there's never a dull moment at the center of the speedway.
Larry, we've passed the 1/6 mark of this race, a little over 30 minutes complete. I noticed the number of laps completed and the amount of time at 30 minutes, 1/6 of the way through. Your leader, Wayne Arnold, had completed 85 laps. If you multiply that by 6, theoretically, Wayne Arnold could complete 510 laps over the course of 3 hours. Last year's winner, Kenny St. John, completed 478. We did make mention of the fact that your fastest two qualifiers a second and a half faster than last year's track record time. So almost assuredly more than 478 laps will be completed by your leader. And if that pace holds true for the first 6 of the race, maybe over 500, as many as 510. Bill Fraser has gone into the pit area in car number 4 under the green. That has to be an unscheduled stop for Bill. One of the real front runners in pro stock racing, and we expected him, despite the fact that he's running with a machine far less in horsepower, far less money invested than Arnold and St. John. We still anticipated him to run up near the front. And Jack Dawsey has spun in the north end of the racetrack. The Camaro that you talked about earlier has had a problem in car number 6. Fortunately, he spins in some open area, is able to turn the machine around and rejoin the race.
We were talking about Frazier a couple of seconds ago, Rob. He was the highest finisher last year from the Indianapolis area outside of the winner St. John. So Frazier, who finished 5th in 1980, he was the 1981 Pro Stock runner-up here at the Speedway. Certainly figured to do pretty well here tonight, but as you pointed out, has made an unscheduled pit stop.
Another one of the guys we ought to take a look at. I'm not sure how he's doing at this point. Seems to be running very smoothly, and as Fraser rejoins the race, car number 2, Donnie Utterback, a seasoned veteran of the Speedrome, is driving the machine that Wayne Arnold piloted to the Pro Stock Points Championship in 1981. The Firebird car number 2 does not have the horsepower, obviously, some of these other outlaw machines, but still a very capable race car. Donnie, during qualifications, had problems in the early going as third place Chuck Hall almost has a real collision in the crossover. He manages to get through, but it was a tense moment for Chuck Hall, and he's given up a lap now to your leader, Wayne Arnold. Four cars together down in the north end of the racetrack, including Bill Fraser in car number 4, Ray Bray in PH5. It looks like car number 7, Jim Tunney, 9017 Dean Griffin, and number 2 that we were just speaking about, Donnie Utterback. So several of the drivers that we've talked a lot about tonight got together, and they've all gotten through it. Ray Bray, the only machine unable to restart. Ray's still working on his car as he coasts backward out of harm's way. And we've now reached, Larry, the 100 lap mark. Of course, laps insignificant, except for the fact the guy who completes the most of them is going to win, and a couple more cars together. It's Ray Gaddis in 779, another one of the Michigan drivers, who gets together with another vehicle and slides into the stalled machine of Ray Bray.
Well, Bray has got to be wondering where he can go to hide, Rob. I tell you, he has certainly been one of the 4 fastest cars on this track all evening during this figure-8 endurance race. He's had all kinds of problems. Now he's involved in a 4-car crash, as at the other end of the speedway, the south end, we have 2 more competitors coming together. The 09 car of Gary Early, he's been in the pits. He lost several laps down there earlier. He continues to sit sideways in the south end of the speedway. And Bray is still without power here in turn number 3 of the figure-8 course. A guy who was as high as 3rd position in this race at one time. The car simply failed to restart after that 5-car crash about 4 laps ago.
Well, the machine that got together with Ray Gaddis, 779, and slid into Ray Bray, the same car that tangled with Gary Early just a half lap later. We're still running under the yellow. And the machine, look, Larry, the north end of the racetrack completely barren at that one particular moment in time. almost an eerie silence for just a brief period as the machines are all tightly bunched together on the racetrack. It's still Arnold out in front. St. John has closed his margin, but St. John with more cars to negotiate. Red flag comes out once again on lap number 104. The first guy to see it and move into the pit area, car number 1, Kenny St. John.
And Rob, I'll tell you, you can really tell the veterans in this type of racing, as soon as that red flag came out, all the guys who are used to this type of endurance racing immediately, regardless of where they were on the racetrack, darted to the pit area. They wasted no time. You can see a lot of the competitors are stuck in the infield area right now. They're losing valuable time that could be utilized to repair their race cars, put more fuel in, maybe change a tire. But the veterans who are used to this type of racing, they knew exactly what to do. Wherever they were on that racetrack, they made an immediate beeline toward the pit area.